Okay, we are recording. I don't know if we're live, but we're recording. Everybody, Scott Donald of SPD Growth and my good friend
Tim Kist, TK3 Consulting.
So we're calling this podcast the Sales and Marketing Alliance podcast for profitable revenue generation. So maybe Tim, to give everyone a bit of perspective, the millions of people who are watching this, why are we calling this the Sales and Marketing Alliance podcast?
Well, Scott, from lots of our discussions and from discussions with other people, it seems that there's often a rift or no connection, no good positive connection between sales and marketing and organizations. Sometimes that's a people thing, sometimes it's a culture thing in an organization. But in the discussions you and I have had, where we're trying to work with clients and help them solve the problem, it seems that the alliance between sales and marketing is something that really drove home for both of us that, yes, that's what's needed. So I think that's the genesis of that idea. And this is how the podcast came about. It's an opportunity for us to share the thoughts that you and I have had for the last couple of years on this topic.
It feels like we're wasting all of our brilliant thoughts and ideas on each other for the last months and years. And now we can share them with everybody else. So the topic today is around the notion of how can sales and marketing being aligned help to tariff or recession-proof businesses, especially in light of all the things that are going on today. And I know we have talked about this. So Tim, from your experience and perspective, how does better alignment between marketing and sales help to tariff or recession-proof a business?
Well, the first thing it does is it keeps you cognizant of what's going on around you. And it's funny that there's another big word. A couple of years ago, we went through a situation with a worldwide pandemic, and it disrupted and impacted a lot of industries. And you'd think we might have learned a few things, but no, we didn't. So as you and I have chatted about this, when I teach marketing and strategic planning in particular, we like to use different tools to help us. And the challenge is, I wonder how often these tools are really used by businesses. And a big one is called PESTEL, P-E-S-T-E-L, stands for looking at the political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal aspects of what's happening around you. The reason you do this, and it's not just for a single event, it should be something ongoing because you're looking for changes, you're looking for trends, and you're looking to see what might be happening around the corner before it actually happens. So you're trying to prepare yourself to the title of this, trying to recession-proof or single event-proof yourself. It is in that preparation, but if you don't know what you're preparing for, how do you know if you're going to be ready or not?
So part of what I took from that is this notion of doing this kind of assessment or risk assessment or environmental scan, in this case, the PESTEL, is really about allowing you to prepare ahead of time as opposed to responding after the fact. Did I hear that right?
That is correct. And then, excuse me, because single tools tend not to be the be all and end all, you've got to look for other ways to do it. So we're often familiar with a tool like a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, excuse me, opportunities and threats. And there's been some interesting articles written about TOWS, T-O-W-S, where you take an outside view, first of all, threats and opportunities, which you would learn about doing your PESTEL analysis, which you then translate into layering on your internal strengths and weaknesses to find out where there might be better opportunities for growth and maybe some things you need to prepare for where you might be a little bit weaker. So it's an interesting interplay between getting the data, learning what it means, and then how you apply it in a situation so that you are insulating yourself in a way from something that could happen. And if it doesn't happen, you're still working really well. Keep doing what you're doing. Be successful.
So, you mentioned PESTEL, you've mentioned SWOT and TOWS. Maybe to some extent, as opposed to us recommending which way they go about doing this, maybe the question that I would ask you is, how often should organizations be stepping back and doing this scanner assessment?
Well, and you and I have talked about this, Scott, and it's unless you're a big enough company that has a dedicated planning department, you have to determine which department in your company has some capability to do this. Typically, it's marketing that should be doing any outside research, engaging a research firm, or using published data, whatever you want to do. That's a good start. The second and really important area is that alignment with the sales team, because the sales team should be advising what's happening with their clients. Not just from what are they buying or not buying, but what are some of the other trends that our clients are seeing that we might need to factor into our planning. So it is that front line, first line, always on kind of an approach for sales and marketing, where this alliance is really important and critical for the rest of the organization. Nowhere else in the organization are they going to be ready and able to collect this kind of data and say, here's what we need to be ready for. Here's what we should prepare to do. And then here's what we should be doing to make sure we're taking advantage of or protecting ourselves, depending on the situation.
So it sounds like a highly controversial take that sales and marketing should be working closely together. And so, so part of what I'm thinking about, and you mentioned the worldwide pandemic. So I'll give an example. You and I have talked about this before. Before the pandemic happened, I was doing a lot of work in one industry, in one country, and the pandemic happened, and that industry wasn't investing in training anymore, and I couldn't cross the border anymore, and that was my first reminder about the importance of diversifying your business, and then more recently, things took off again, and for a year and a half, I was fat and happy doing a bunch of work in that industry again. And then for a couple of different reasons, that stopped. So I think maybe what would be interesting is maybe just to hear your thoughts on what you've seen with businesses that have pulled the Scott, if you will, and had a lot of their business, and maybe there's even a percentage here that's healthy. What would be the recommendation for the healthy number of business with one group? And what are the benefits of diversifying your revenue from a client or industry perspective?
Well, sure. And there's a couple of things on that one, because everybody likes to get the trophy client. Everybody likes to have the big customer. It's the showcase. You can brag to your friends and competitors when you go to industry events. Hey, I've got so-and-so is our client. Well, that client then has big sway over you, because they can dictate terms. They might even think they can change terms, especially if they're getting calls from other competitors of yours.
Yeah.
So is there a magic number? I think each company would have to take a look at their own, again, and this is where we get to profitable revenue. Find that area where if you lose them, how much can you afford to lose before you're now in an unprofitable revenue situation?
Right.
It's finding out that, hey, if this particular big client represents 25% of my business, if I lose that 25%, am I still profitable, even just a little bit, which allows me to go and find some other clients? And for various reasons, you should always be looking to add more clients, just because you get things like mergers and acquisitions happen, companies shut their doors because of pandemic reasons and things like that.
The maker moves into a big account and they want to go in a different direction.
Right.
So I guess, this is all the good stuff that comes out of doing a SWOT or a TOES or a PESTLE or whatever scan you're doing. I'm hesitating because I was going to ask why do organizations not do this? And I'm avoiding the urge to ask that question, and instead I want to turn around and say, maybe we'll wrap it in a bow here. What are the benefits to organizations, doing these things on a regular basis, besides diversifying their revenue? Because that's obviously one way to tariff or recession-proof your business. But what else do you get out of it?
Well, I think one of the other big things is you make sure that everybody in your organization understands the factors that are impacting your business, plus or minus.
Everybody.
So everybody. And
nice segue to our next point.
And that's, but that's important, right? I mean, people in the front line want to know how their job impacts delivery of value to a customer. And if things change with that customer, people need to understand the first question might be, oh my gosh, we lost 25% of my business. Do we lose 25% of our staff? Well, now it gets back to a culture situation. What would leadership say? Hey, no, we're gonna hold everybody here. Like a lot of businesses did that during the pandemic. You saw executives take $1 salaries and make sure that there was still money for their employees to get paid because they knew they would get out of it.
Yeah.
I think the same thing holds here. If you lose a big client, what's your likelihood of getting another client or enough other clients to fill that void so you don't have to lose any people? And you think of it, if the organization has done such a good job at keeping good people, man, you just don't want to lose them. So whatever you can do to keep them gets those people fired up, keeps those people committed, and that helps you move forward. It's another way to recession-proof your business is take good care of your people.
So it's funny because you've touched on a couple of things, and I think this is a great segue. So my summary of what you've said here is the idea of part of your marketing and sales strategy should be to have regular and periodic assessments about what you're doing well and what are your risks, so you can constantly be adapting and evolving so that you have that diversity of revenue. The other thing you mentioned about is everybody in the company sort of being on the same page, and that brings us to what I would call point 2. And if I was better with this platform, I could have a big 2 come up here. But prior to preparing for this, we talked about this notion of create more us. I'm looking at my notes here. And we describe us as being not looking at sales as a separate group or marketing as a separate group, but sales and marketing together, but also, support and fulfillment and finance and operations and all these departments feeling like they're an us versus having sales and or marketing under other groups be them. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Sure. I think one of the easiest ways to create an us is to have your focus on your customer, not on your individual department. So it was a question somebody asked me actually on LinkedIn today, said, okay, Coach Kist, use a sports analogy and explain this. And the answer that I gave was, if nobody cares about who gets the credit, then you have an us culture.
Nice.
And, we know that sales has such an important role in representing the company, but it's everyone else who also delivers the value of that product or service that goes to the client. So if sales doesn't brag, and if the rest of the organization doesn't care that sales has the right to say, hey, look what I did, what we did, then you're okay. You can move forward collectively as an us. But if someone in marketing gets mad because sales gets the glory, that's not good. It starts to create that rift, and then there's no us. There's a between us.
So again, with this notion of your winning game plan, that the TK3 thing, is this idea that I know obviously you have a football background, and I could have played professional hockey if I wasn't so crappy. But aside from all of that, is the idea that the quarterback may be a high profile position, but they can't win on their own, and the goalie, like a Connor Hellebuck, may be a high profile position, but without, I want to say supporting cast, but without all the other people on the team doing their job, you're not going to have success. So I don't know if that's the best analogy, but that's the one that came to mind as you were chatting, is that when the star goalie or the star quarterback is just one of the team, and everybody realizes that special teams and receivers and blockers and tight ends and middle linebackers, they're all doing their job. And when that happens, then the team wins. So I guess, in your experience, what are maybe some other things that organizations can do to ensure that all these different departments that we've talked about can feel like they're part of the win, part of, you bring in the elephant, you bring in the big account, or you have a really successful year and you hit your number, besides the theory of us, what else does that look like in terms of making sure everyone feels like they're part of that big Grey Cup or Super Bowl win?
Well, a big part of it is teamwork. Is do your job, trust your teammate to do theirs. So in sports, let's take football. The quarterback has to trust that the offensive line can block, that the snap can come back and he can get it, that the receivers are going to run the pattern. Someone's going to be open. I'm going to see that. I'm going to throw it. Person's going to catch, completion, success. That's ideal. Sometimes it doesn't always work out that way, because guess what? The other team is good. The other team is also prepared. They've done what they can do to get ready to try and
The
stop
competition in the
Right.
marketplace.
And in business, it's not directly head to head that way in that ultimate competition, but it's with the customer. So how do you convey that sense of extra value, that care? What's different about you that sets you apart from your competition? Without talking about them, you've got to find out what's going to be valuable for that customer that only you can do, that you can say, this is my unfair business advantage. So
Nice plug.
there you go. In the collaboration side of things here too, it is everybody in the organization understanding that this is what my job does to deliver that value at the end of the day. I've unfortunately seen the opposite side, where plans were presented. People left the presentation of the plans with the question, I have no idea how my job fits into that.
Right.
So good leaders make sure that everybody understands that, supports that, because you have to put your people in a position to win, to be successful. If everybody's successful internally, great. I think there is need for a silo mentality, oddly, because and this gets back to do your job.
Controversial again?
No, I'm going to argue against myself in a way. The do your job, trust your teammate to do theirs is a silo thinking. You have to be good at what you're doing. Now, what happens is you need to have that collaboration, communication.
Yep. That's
where the us comes in, so that singularly the organization moves forward. Singular message goes out, customer sees it. What sales says they can do is supported by production, delivery, engineering, customer support, proper and adequate billing messages, all that sort of thing. The whole process just works. If it doesn't, now you've started to plant a seed in your customer's mind of, they don't seem to be able to do everything very well. I like this, but I don't like that. And that's where they are now ripe for competitor to come in and try and steal the business.
So my summary of all of this in terms of the us is it really is now a requirement for leadership at all levels in the organization, starting at the top, to make sure that everybody understands their role, but not just their role, but also how their role fits in. So I'm almost thinking of like mission, vision, and values. I've done some work in the past where, organizations would create a mission statement or a mission or vision statement. However, it would be done in the context of themselves or their team and how it rolls up, right? So this notion of when you understand not only your role, but how your role contributes to the game, the game plan, it's easier for you to operate sort of not without blinders on, but realizing that this piece that I'm doing, which may seem mundane, it's important, because if it doesn't get done, it impacts, there's a domino effect, right? Which could impact not only the ability to earn the client, but also the ability to keep the client. So all that said, in addition to having a sales and marketing plan and doing regular assessments, it's incumbent on leadership to make sure the communication is there so that all people who are part of the team understand what they do contributes to the success of the overall team on a game by game, client by client basis.
Right. And it also means, in a sense, keep your nose out of your other department's business. Like, I've unfortunately had a couple of situations where people in, let's say finance or IT would make comments about marketing campaigns or something like that. And it's, hey, listen, thanks for your comment, but I'm not doing anything with it because it's just your opinion, and your opinion counts for one. You don't like it when I say, gee, I wish our system could do this, or can you pull me this special report out of, the billing system? My gosh, you'd think that the world was going to end. But and that's single events. This is not a generalization. There's, I know a lot of really fine IT folks and fine accounting people, and they get the good business sense. Those are the ones that are successful, actually, because they see broadly. They see how all the different parts fit together. That's the good side of it. That's when you have success. I mean, I think at clients I do work with that are successful, probably the biggest thing from the CEOs is the frequency and directness and accuracy of the communication they have, not just at their level, or with their direct reports, but it's throughout the organization. And if you talk to anybody in the organization, they would reiterate that view of the CEO.
So it's interesting, right? So again, I'm going to be controversial because I see how easily and smoothly you do it. But I think if I think of it in the team context, everyone understands how their role contributes to the overall goal of the organization. There's lots of communication and collaboration and partnership that's going on, but at the same time, focus on what you do and what you're good at. And so what I would add to this, I've got the gray hair and glasses that I've been in organizations where I've had people in finance or people in operations or people in software development tell me how to sell. And so this is my gentle and cautionary comment on that, is that my ability to do operations or finance or do software development are probably very similar to your ability to do sales and marketing. Is that too harsh or is that okay?
No, it's sometimes what needs to be said. Sometimes the price of clarity is the willingness to offend. And I'm not saying you're being offensive. It just means you're standing up for yourself. And I think it's reasonable to do that. I remember in one book that I read, fellow over in the UK, the company that he worked for, they actually specifically invited the rest of the company to provide some comments on ads before they went live. But this was after his team had done all the research development, right, and it was like 95% done. And even though it had been tested with people, normal people outside the company, it still was an opportunity for getting people. Here's a sneak peek, before everyone else sees it. People, and if you have a thought on one or two of these things,
people love to have input, right?
Yep. And sometimes he said, there was the odd time when something came up and people went, gee, I never thought of it that way. So it was good. But more often than not, everything was fine. They were doing a good job and they were successful with it. So every now and again, and it's because, listen, we're all, at the end of the day, we go home, we're consumers. So whether we consume our own product, which you hope you do, or something else, you form opinions. Your other circles of influence in your life that, from a social to a family to a cultural to an economic impact is going to help shape, what you buy, how you buy, and where you buy it. And so getting some different opinions from inside your company can be beneficial because you could get some small sample of different views. Now you have to determine, do I use it or not?
I can't even tell you how often. And I think, that I know my business and I know sales fairly well, but every once in a while, my wife, Carol, will say, hey, have you ever thought about doing that? I'm like, crap. Why didn't I think of that?
It's because you've got the curse of knowledge.
You'll never see this, so I'm okay sharing that.
I'll make sure I pass it on. It's what's known as the curse of knowledge. You're so focused and so invested and so knowledgeable in your stuff, and it's human nature. Great, we're doing stuff we're good at, but we don't often have that step back to say, what else have I seen or what else have I missed here? I never thought of it that way.
Well, I think what you just said there and what I said is that we're making our case for the benefit of an external outside perspective and helping organizations drive more of the right kind of revenue.
I agree. That's exactly what we said.
So point 3, that was subtle how we slipped that in there. So point 3 that we talked about helping organizations tariff and recession proof their business is this notion of, and it all falls into communication. And I wrote down here, celebrate the small wins, right? So if we go to the football example, how many small wins does a football team celebrate on the way to a victory, right? A tackle, a good catch, a good run, a special teams play, all those little things, they are high-fiving and bumping chests with each other. So what does that tell us then in terms of if teams and elite athletes are performing at the highest in order to be successful? What does that translate into an organization in terms of their ability to celebrate small wins as a way to not only keep people engaged and involved and create the us, but also create that positive culture and momentum towards the ongoing success?
The only caveat, and I would encourage people to go back and listen to your initial comment because it was spot on. It's on the way towards the victory, you celebrate those small wins. It's not when you're losing the game by 40 points and you make a 15-yard catch and you jump up and down like you're winning. No, don't do that. That's not the celebration you want.
Okay, hold on. Are you telling me that on Thursday nights at hockey, when I'm getting lit up, if I make a big glove save, I'm not allowed to do the big windmill? I really?
No windmill,
I've been doing that wrong for like 50 years then, Tim.
Because as a shooter, I'm remembering that, and I'm going headhunting next time.
And honestly, that's exactly what I'm counting on, because when people are going for my head, they're not thinking about scoring. So that's still a win for Scott.
Anyway. Good point. That's a good point.
Okay, so celebrating the small wins, how does that translate from the football field or the hockey arena to the boardroom and the company?
Well, it's all about moving forward. And oftentimes companies will have, set a target. Let's just pick a number, 10% growth. And I think you and I have talked about both being in situations in the past where you didn't hit the 10%, you hit 8. And it was like, oh, darn, we didn't get our 10%. Time out. We got 8, with all the things happening in the market. And especially if 8 tends to be on the higher end of the industry, my goodness, you better be celebrating, because if you don't, people will think, you mean I worked all year long, we grew the business 8%, and you're still dumping all over me.
And that's my, I think about, so I'm a psychology major from a million years ago, right? Positive reinforcement, behavior modification, Pavlov's dog, all that stuff. And what's interesting about what you're saying there is the idea that, people don't tend to get any feedback until they get the feedback of, we lost. And how great of a culture is that, and how motivating is that relative to, the organization that is figuratively, celebrating and high-fiving each other, even if they're not winning, but they're still recognizing and acknowledging the small wins.
Well, it's like when the player makes a mistake, and the only comment the coach has when the player comes off the field or the ice is, what did you do that for? Well, gee, if I knew the answer, I wouldn't have done it in the first place. Come on, help me out. So it's like, you have to correct it. If it's a tactical, technical thing that the person did wrong, the player did wrong, you got to fix it. But at the same time, it's like, to your point about positive reinforcement and things, you got to get that player's head away from the past, turn the page, next player out there, forget about that, focus on this.
Why do you do that? Why do you want to get the player's head out of the past?
Because you can't change the past, for one. The only thing I can impact is the next play. And it's the same thing in business.
I'm worrying about the notion of the player or the employee worried about, basically, when you're playing not to make a mistake, how effective are you, right?
Oh, you're not playing to your fullest potential if you're playing not to make a mistake. You can pick up any book on psychology, on business growth, etc. It's the classic. If you're not making some mistakes, you're not getting any better, because right. It's not what happens to you, it's how you recover. Your muscles get torn down little by little when you lift heavier weights. They build up so you become stronger and stronger. It's this, there you go. That's a perfect example.
Or maybe not.
Well, pipe cleaners out of your shirt. That looks good.
Okay.
It's the same thing in business. If you're not trying to do something, you're going to be doing the same thing. Now, both of you and I are big on fundamentals, but this isn't just about fundamentals. If you don't have good fundamentals, you can't do some new and exciting things. Right. So this is your chance to grow, try something out. Typically, unless somebody is physically hurt, morally harmed, or something else, you're going to be okay to make that mistake and try to move forward. It's very few times that you're putting in that situation. And if you're going to do something that's physically challenging, hold on, be careful about that. But that doesn't happen that often. So encouraging people to think about that, encouraging the what if. One of the biggest traits that we think people should have is be curious. It's the ability to not say why and be snarky about it, but it's help me understand why, because I think I see something different here, that if we do this little adjustment, I think it can be even better.
I love that notion about being curious. And you made a point earlier that I really want to highlight, and it's that idea of, and it keeps coming into my head and then leaving again, Oh, about creating an environment where people aren't afraid to make a mistake, because that's how you learn. And the example that I would give when I was doing a lot of training in oil and gas is, if it doesn't cost the company a bunch of money and someone's not going to lose a hand, are you okay as a leader allowing someone to make a mistake or do something wrong and have it be a learning experience, as opposed to the micromanaging, and then when it does go wrong, jumping all over them, right?
If it's not illegal, immoral, and no one's
Yeah.
getting physically hurt, it's probably okay. But now it's in how you correct it. So in football, when I was coaching, coaching the linebackers, and guy makes a mistake on the play, I have two options essentially. Number one is to get mad at the player for making the mistake, and if he's done it 10 times in a row, I probably have a reason, or I should be checking my coaching approach to make sure maybe he just doesn't understand it, or I'm asking him to do something that he can't do. The second thing is, if you focus on the performance of that position and the requirement, now you're saying to everyone else, hey, everyone else who plays that position, this is what we want you to do. On the last play, Tim didn't do what we needed him to do. He's got to do X. Everyone who plays this position has to do that next thing the right way. So it's a reinforcement for everybody. Same thing happens in business. If a sales person does one thing, if a marketing person does one thing, if someone in IT does, okay, let's correct it so that everybody understands the importance of the correction. We're dealing with the performance. We're not dealing with the individual. Anything chronic, I'm taking out of the equation. That's different.
I've called this the idea of encouraging leaders to find or to catch people doing good stuff. And what do you call it?
A good finder. You got to be a good finder.
So I'm going to challenge and double dog dare sales leaders, marketing leaders, C-level executives to be really cognizant and intentional about catching people doing good stuff, celebrating the small wins, the tackles and the interceptions that lead to the success. So as we wrap this up, the three main points that we're trying to nail down here to help organizations be more tariff or recession proof is: one, have a sales and marketing plan and review your results on a regular basis to see how you're doing, threats, opportunities, pestle, all those things. The second piece is, this is really a leadership thing as well, is think about the things that you're doing to create the us environment, whether that's sales and marketing, or whether that's sales and marketing and all the other divisions within the company as they contribute towards that customer engagement. And the third piece is to not just focus on the end result, but celebrate the small wins along the way and the course corrections where they may be required. Anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a tremendous encapsulation of it, Scott. It's and again, it sounds simple, but we know that it's difficult in practice for so many reasons, not least of which is lots of things happen on a day-to-day basis. The more cognizant that leaders in particular can be of this, the better they will serve their organization. And if we come at it from the Sales and Marketing Alliance perspective and encourage our colleagues in sales and marketing to come at it from that alliance, I think when you've got somebody leading from within like that, in addition to the C-suite, it really starts to have a very big and powerful impact throughout the organization in a positive way.
So again, I think the other message that I want to wrap up is just this notion of start with ensuring sales and marketing are working together as a team, and there's lots of collaboration. There's an alliance there. They're seen as two parts of the same equation. And when you have the sales and marketing team working together like that, you're going to have more revenue. You're going to have better revenue. You're going to have more diversified revenue, which in the end makes you even more tariff and recession proof.
100%.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Tim.
Okay.
I'm going to get this posted up. It's supposed to go live. I did something wrong, but I'll get this posted up, and would love to hear people's thoughts, and stay safe.
Absolutely. Get comments on this one, because if someone's got a different perspective, let's talk about it.
Very good. Thanks, Tim.
Cheers, Scotty.